It was the middle of summer and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good, and the first night I was alone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up, and I saw it was a little bit past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at about 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone, scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard one of the doors open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the door is pretty loud when it opens and closes. Same with the front door. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, trying to hear anything else. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. Even though my house is old as shit, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of those stairs. So when I get to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was probably being stupid and dramatic. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen, even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastening myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid, and I just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the most strange, abnormal position I've ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point to where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little bit behind himself. It's hard to explain what I mean. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how creepy this situation was, but in the moment I just took a step towards him and I punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping and pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined it up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and I locked the door behind me. I quickly put up a chair against the doorknob. Almost without thinking, I also immediately called 911 and, nearly in tears, I told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here as soon as possible, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. The guy was standing outside of my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in different ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello, sir, are you there? Hello?" But I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually, the light returned to the gap and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock in the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street, smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, maybe that's for the better. So I've had quite a few bad experiences with strange people in my house. From when I was young, an old man would come banging on our door late at night, demanding to see me, causing me to have to hide in the house. Or once when a man came knocking on our door late at night with a knife, because he mistook our house for my neighbor's. These experiences all caused me to be very cautious about opening the front door to anyone, or even being in the house alone, especially at night. But one evening was definitely the worst. It was around 6 p.m. in November of 2018. I'm from England, meaning it was already pitch black outside at this time of the year. I had just got home from work and I was sitting in my room upstairs, just watching YouTube on my laptop. My mom shouted up to me that she was just going to pick my brother up from work and would be stopping off at the gas station on the way back, so she would be gone for a little bit, and asked if I wanted to come. I said no and I carried on with my video. I heard her close the front door and pull out of the driveway. I was 17 at the time, so being home alone at night was nothing new to me and I was used to the eerie feeling of it. But after around 10 minutes, I started hearing noises coming from downstairs. At first I thought nothing of it and I just related it to my cat, noisily searching for food in an empty bowl. Until I remembered him sitting at the end of my bed. I paused my video and I listened more at the sound of the banging on my back door. This instantly creeped me out, until it was followed by the sound of keys dangling, and I just thought, oh, my mom must have dropped my brother off before going to the station, and he's just trying to go outside. So I let the noise continue as I kept watching my video. He can get quite angry at times, so the loud banging was nothing out of the ordinary, but it just kept carrying on. Banging and the sounds of keys dangling, then dropping, then banging again. Then the fear really hit me. I don't think it's him. I walked out of my room slowly and sat on the stairs, listening carefully to the noise. It definitely wasn't him. I'm an extremely anxious person, and everyone gets those times late at night when they hear noises and immediately think the worst. This was just one of those, I told myself. So I decided to bite the bullet and just walk straight into the kitchen and face whatever it was that was causing the noise. Our kitchen has the door facing straight to the garden. But as I turned the corner into the kitchen, I heard a loud bang and clatter of footsteps run away. The cat flap had been ripped off the door and there was plastic from it everywhere. In fear, I still tried to console myself into thinking it could have been anything other than people breaking in. I sat back on the stairs and called my mom just to check again that it wasn't my brother home early and just in a bad mood. But then he answered my mom's phone while still in the car. "Are you home?" I shouted at him. Then my voice started to break with terror. "Please be serious. Are you home right now?" I asked. "No. What do you want?" he said. Even though he said he wasn't, I still begged in my mind that he was joking, just to scare the shit out of me. But he heard how scared I was and began to worry. I explained to him what happened and he started to scream at me to call the police. He's never been the protective type, but I could tell now he was really worried and told my mom to rush back home straight away. While calling for the police, I tried so hard to stay calm. I told them exactly what was happening as I hid back in my room with the door tightly locked. Then I heard talking and the banging of doors downstairs again. They were back. I bursted into tears to the dispatcher out of pure fear, and I sat on the phone for what felt like forever until my mom, brother, and police all pulled up at the same time. Everyone charged through the house to the back door, and we instantly saw what they had done. The people saw the keys to the back door on the side in the kitchen, took a broom from outside, broke it in half on the door handle, got the broom through the cat flap, knocked the keys off the side, and pulled them through the cat flap. Although out of pure luck, as they broke the broom in half, they also managed to snap off the door handle, making it completely impossible for it to be opened from the outside. Otherwise, they would have gotten in, no questions asked, and I would have been sitting quietly in my room, completely oblivious. It was clear afterward that they had been watching the house for a while, waiting until the exact moment that they saw my mom's car pull out of the drive. I'm not sure if they knew I was there alone or not, but I know that after they initially saw me and ran away, they made a choice to come back. This happened several years ago when I lived with my ex-boyfriend. So we had been living there for roughly 1 month when this event occurred. My ex was out with work colleagues and I was home alone. I spent the early evening watching TV and eating takeout. A couple of times I heard some strange noises, but whenever I would try to zone in on them to figure out what the hell it was, it seemed like it would stop. It got later into the night and I decided to go upstairs and use the computer for a little while before heading to bed. At this point in time, we hadn't had our phone line installed and I was still on a pay-and-go phone which had run out of credit. I basically had no way to communicate with anyone while I was in the house for the night. So I'm sitting in the bedroom with only a small table lamp on that barely forms a glow while I'm typing away on my laptop when I started to hear weird noises again. It started as a light rattling noise and like really faint to the point where I had to strain to hear if I was really hearing it or imagining it. I shut my music off and I tried to figure out what it was. I went into our bedroom and looked down to the front door, but nobody is there. We had a small yard with a high brick wall and a solid wooden gate with nothing to cast any light. But from what little I could see, there was nothing out back either. I sat back down and I switched the music back on. I would say about 10 minutes later, I hear this very eerie screeching sound, like metal on metal. Again, very faint. As if whatever was making it was trying desperately to be quiet. I was getting more than a little freaked out by this point, so I went into our bedroom to retrieve this heavy iron rod that we found in the back of the built-in wardrobe. I didn't switch on any lights as I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want to alert any possible intruder to my location inside the house. Remember, I had no way of calling anyone, and I was getting more than a little concerned that someone might actually be in my house. I headed into the bathroom to see if I could get a better look into the alley that the house backed onto. The office and bedroom and the bathroom formed an L around the yard, with the bathroom extending further out. I climbed up onto the ledge and inched the window open to try to see out into the alley. I couldn't see a thing, but the whispering was louder and coming from directly behind my gate. I couldn't hear whole sentences, but I heard enough to summarize whoever these men were and that they'd seen us move in and had seen we had quite a lot of valuable equipment, like guitars, computers, my DSLR, TV, game consoles, etc. I imagine they had seen I was home alone and they were waiting for me to go to sleep, to try to get into the house. I stayed perched there for what felt like an eternity until what seemed like the loudest thud in the world echoed up to me. I guess they grew tired of trying to be stealthy and one or both of them were throwing themselves at my gate trying to break it down. I could see it shuddering under the blows and could only imagine how large these men must be. I'm a tiny girl, all of a whole 5'3", and at that point I probably weighed somewhere around 105 pounds. As you can imagine, I was white with terror as I watched my gate groan under the stress. I sat clutching that iron rod just trying to think where I could hide from them. Suddenly, a glaring light blinded me. At first, I panicked and dropped out of sight, thinking they were shining a flashlight at the back of the house. But then I heard barking and shouting. I peeked out again and I saw the house, which was across the alley from us, had a floodlight installed, and it was illuminating both their own yard, mine and the alleyway, with light. I heard grumbling and cursing, and then 2 sets of footsteps hurrying down the alley. I stayed locked in that bedroom until my ex-boyfriend drunkenly rolled in at about 4 a.m. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and when I went into the yard in the morning, my gate was hanging by one hinge, allowing easy access from the alley. When I looked at the back of it, the keyhole was covered in scratches, as if someone had tried to force the lock. If they hadn't woken the house behind us, I dread to think what could have happened. This happened well over 10 years ago, so I will try my best to describe the events accurately. One of my childhood homes had a balcony that was attached to both my mother's bedroom and mine, via big double glass doors in each one of our rooms. Next to the balcony are 2 trees. One I used to often climb up and down from the balcony. This balcony faced out to the street. I was a 13-year-old girl at the time of this story. One night, when my brother and mother weren't home, I was reading in bed with a very dim reading light. I heard what sounded like something moving in one of the trees outside, but this didn't worry me as possums and bats are common in our area. Now I had thin curtains covering the glass doors that separated my room and the balcony. As mentioned previously, the doors faced out towards the street where a street lamp light was almost always visible through my curtains. Shortly after hearing the tree rustling noises, I see a shadow slowly move past the doors, at which point I immediately turn off my reading light and freeze like a deer in headlights. The shadow was tall, so it wasn't one of the neighbor kids that I'm friends with, and it wasn't my 5-foot mother. The person moved slowly, creeping as though they were trying not to be noticed. They wouldn't likely be able to see into my room, but I could see them thanks to the streetlights behind them, creating a dark silhouette. They moved past my doors out of sight, and I sat there unable to move, or even think about what to do, other than be absolutely still. That is until I heard another sound. The sound of someone trying to open one of the glass doors. My mom's door to the balcony. I didn't know if she had locked him or not, but I wasn't taking any chances. I moved as quickly and as silently as I could to the bedroom door and locked it. I listened for what the person was doing now, and they were still jiggling the glass door handle, but it sounded like the doors weren't opening. I felt relief, like this person couldn't get in surely. All I had to do was wait for them to realize that, and then they would leave, right? Well, I heard light footsteps move back along the balcony to my set of glass doors, till I saw his shadow stop directly in front of them. Again, I froze, knowing he couldn't see me. He didn't know I could see him though. I saw a shadow of a hand reach up to my door handle and my heart stopped. Had I actually locked those doors myself today? I mean, I was out there earlier, what if I forgot? The seconds leading up to him grabbing the handle felt like an eternity. But thankfully, when this person tried to open the door, it did not open. It was locked. I sighed such a sigh of relief. I was worried he had heard it. After this, he began pacing the length of the balcony. I didn't have a mobile phone, as my mom thought I was too young to have one yet, and the landline was at the other end of the house. But I was too scared to take my eyes off of this person, even to call for help. I was silently crying, with tears falling down my cheeks as I internally prayed that they would just leave. Then I heard him stop moving. He then said, "I could just break the glass, you know." Before I could even process this, I saw car headlights turn around the corner of my street and then stop at our property gate. My mom was home. The person on the balcony moved out of sight, and I heard a loud thump as they jumped off of it. When my mom came inside, I was hysterical, and I was barely coherent in telling her what happened. Eventually, I got the message across, and she called the police. They never found or caught anyone, but a neighbor reported a truck in the street that matched the description of a truck that had been reported recently for attempted child abductions near my school a block away. Since I walked that short distance daily, the police suspected that he had followed me or seen that I lived there and waited for me to be alone. When I was 10, my parents and I went to visit my grandmother for spring break. My cousin also came to visit, and we decided we wanted to go to the YMCA for the day. My grandma dropped us off and said that she would come pick us up in 4 hours. On that day, the YMCA was empty. There were a couple of adults in the exercise room, but that's it. We went to the basketball court, and after 2 hours of playing tag and shooting baskets, we were bored. I've never been the biggest fan of swimming, but this place had a really cool pool, so we changed into our bathing suits and headed in there. The pool was empty except for the lifeguard. We played a bunch of games and swam laps, but after about an hour, there wasn't much left to do, and there was no one except us to hang out with to keep things interesting. So we decided to play a game of seeing how long we could hold our breath underwater. We stood in the shallow end, near the clock on the wall, so we could time ourselves. Instead of fully submerging, we just stuck our heads face down in the water. We did this a couple of times, and I was winning. On our last round, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I figured it was my cousin giving up and telling me that I won. But instead, it was the lifeguard who told me to knock it off, or she was going to have to ask us to leave the pool. Since we were tired of being in the pool already, we figured we would just get out and get dressed, and go back to the basketball court, until my grandma picked us up. We only had an hour left anyways, and the water was freezing. As we got out, the lifeguard stopped us, and asked if we wanted to go into the sauna, to warm up and dry off. The sign said 18 years of older, so, of course, we were super excited that she allowed us to do that. She walked us to the sauna and unlocked the door. The door was glass and the interior was made entirely out of wood. Inside, above the door, there was a clock, probably to help make sure you were not in there for an unsafe amount of time. The lifeguard stand was adjacent to the sauna, but if you looked out the door, you could clearly see it. She followed us in and went over to the thermometer encased in plastic and unlocked it so she could crank up the heat. I figured that she must have to turn it on each time, so I didn't think anything of it. Both my cousin and I were very short girls, so we couldn't see the temperature that was on the thermometer knob, but I know she was turning up the heat. Then she left and shut the door behind her. I thought I saw her lock the door too, but I thought to myself, why would she lock the door when we might want to get out? I checked the clock and decided that we should get out in 10 or 15 minutes. It was already plenty warm in the sauna, but now the room was blazing. It felt nice because I was so cold from the pool. After about 15 minutes though, it was starting to get a little bit too hot, and my cousin agreed that we should leave so we can get dressed. I went to turn the knob on the door, but it wasn't budging. I thought maybe it was jammed, so I shook it, but it still wasn't opening, and then I let my cousin try. She couldn't get it open either. We figured the lifeguard would be back in a couple of minutes, so we sat back down and waited. The room was getting hotter now, and I really wanted to leave. I got up and started banging on the door and shaking and twisting the knob, trying to get the lifeguard's attention. My cousin got up and joined me. We started screaming at the top of our lungs for her to let us out, but she just stared straight ahead. I don't think there's any way that she couldn't have noticed or heard two little girls banging and kicking the door and screaming. Now we had been in there for about 25 minutes. It was so hot in the sauna that it hurt to breathe. It felt like my lungs were on fire. My eyes and skin were burning. We sat back down and put our towels over our heads because they were a little damp and it made it easier to breathe. I was so worried about my cousin, as she is a couple years younger than me. I looked at the clock and saw that we had been in there for about 35 minutes. I got up and walked up to the door again and saw the lifeguard still just staring straight ahead. Again, I tried to get her attention by screaming that we needed to get out and banging on the door as hard as I could, but nothing. I was starting to get pretty dizzy, so I went to go sit back down, but the wooden seats of the sauna burned my skin. My towel was completely dry, so I put it underneath me to sit on. My hair was also dry, but I wrapped it across my face to cover my nose, and I squinted my eyes so that they didn't burn as bad, but I could still watch if anyone walked past the door. It helped a little bit. My cousin was laying face down with a towel over her head, not moving or saying anything, so I nudged her to make sure that she was still okay. She was, but I could tell that we really need to get out of there soon, because she seemed a bit disoriented. It had been 45 minutes now, and I was extremely nauseous. There was no way that the lifeguard would forget that we were in there, and I thought she would have to come back soon. But there was this little voice in my head telling me that maybe she purposely locked us in there. Finally, a man walked past the door towards the pool, but for some reason, I just couldn't get up. My whole body was on fire and I felt dizzy. Luckily, this man wasn't going to the pool. He wanted to be let into the sauna and came back with a lifeguard. I saw them walking this way and immediately jumped up to grab my cousin. I knew now for sure that she locked us in there because she pulled out her keys to unlock the door and let the man in. I didn't want to take any chances of us being trapped in there any longer, so as the man was trying to walk in, I was trying to shove our way out. As we were going out, the lifeguard started trying to shut the door and push us back with it. The man was clearly confused about what was going on and said, I think they want out. The lifeguard let out a sigh and opened the door fully, and we ran away as fast as we could into the changing room. We only had about 10 minutes before our grandma was supposed to pick us up. We were both so shaken by what just happened that we didn't say anything to each other as we got dressed or on the car ride home. When we got back to the house, my parents were making us dinner, and I told them the story of what happened. They thought that I must have been exaggerating, and they didn't believe me. I truly think that that woman was going to let us cook alive in there. The only bit of doubt that I have is what would have happened if we actually died. She obviously would have gotten the blame. What was her endgame? I'm 21 now, but I still think about this interaction all the time. When I'm in small spaces, or I get too warm, I still have panic attacks. No one believes this story, and I get it because it's pretty absurd. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask for opinions, but do you think this could have been some crazy misunderstanding? Or do you think that she really just left us in there to die, and why? I used to work in a strip mall out in a fairly rural area. Most people are recognizable, even if you don't know them personally. People from out of the area frequently stop on their way through other towns. So it's not like there are never out-of-towners, just that they might be easy to spot. Like many places, we have a few homeless folks that hang around the shopping center, and they occasionally ask people for change or food. It can be a nuisance, but the folks that worked at the shops kind of kept an eye on them, to help them out or to keep track of how they are doing. There was this one guy, let's call him Shane, that over the course of years has slowly gotten in worse and worse shape. He would be filthy and was clearly not doing well mentally, and was usually intoxicated. He always had several layers of clothing, and the pants that he wore on the outside of his pants always sagged, making it hard for him to walk. He'd go missing for days and then show up again. We'd wonder what happened to Shane and ask around a bit, and a few days later he'd appear again. He was always so dirty. I always wished there was a way we could get him some help, but I didn't really know what to do. One day, I was out in a major city that is about 80 or so miles away from where I work. I happened to see a very well-dressed, very well-groomed gentleman that looked exactly like Shane. But at that moment, I figured my eyes were deceiving me. This guy has an expensive-looking shoulder bag, a new iPhone, and an Apple Watch. We were both in line at a popular food truck, and it was usually a long wait to order and get your food. Most people just mind their business and scroll on their phones while waiting. This guy, on the other hand, is staring daggers at me. I keep avoiding looking that way, but I keep glancing to see if he's still there. And at the same time, I went to look at him because I was curious about how much he looks like Shane. I glance his way, and I have to stumble back because he's practically right up against me. He has such intense eyes. He sort of whispers to me, but really intensely, and tells me he knows where I'm from and what shop I work at. He gets closer, and I can tell that he smells good, and I could even smell his minty breath. I ask how he knows, and he just smiles. I ask again, and he smiles brighter, exposing a perfectly clean set of teeth, minus one tooth. I'm almost positive Shane is missing that tooth. I edge away, feeling more than a little uncomfortable. His order gets called up, but they say his name is James. The next few days, I don't see Shane anywhere around the shopping center, and I ask around, and no one had seen him for a few days. Someone says they hope he's okay, and another person shrugs and says they wish they could do something to help him. The next day, there he is, filthy as ever, grimy teeth, dirty fingernails, and wearing all of his layers. He sits on the curb outside my shop and asks people for change. I decide to venture out and confront him. I'm 100% sure that it's him, but I don't understand how he could get so filthy and smelly in such a short time. I asked him if he was in the city, and he looks at me through bloodshot eyes and mumbles that he'll kill me if I tell anyone. This takes me aback, and I looked at him puzzled. He slurs again, that he will kill me if I tell anyone that he's not actually homeless. He starts to get worked up, and I ended up calling the police because I didn't know at that point what he was capable of. He wandered off, and I haven't seen him since.